This is a spoiler warning for the MonsterVerse movies. Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire came out a few months ago, and while I enjoyed the movie for what it is, there were parts of it that left me feeling unsatisfied. Yeah, it was fun to see giant monsters clash against each other, but in the past, the MonsterVerse has had a lot more to offer than just that. Let me make it clear before we head further into this video, this is not a video comparing Godzilla X Kong to Godzilla Minus One. Yes, they are both Godzilla films, but they are both very clearly different in terms of tone and the types of movies that they wanted to be. And I love that we live in a time where both movies can exist. I wanted to make this video not only to examine the parts of Godzilla X Kong that made it weak, but also to examine the evolution of the MonsterVerse, how it portrays its biggest hero, Godzilla, and its action. Let's put the focus on Godzilla X Kong first, shall we? Part 1. The Skar King is underwhelming. In the movie, Kong accidentally frees the great apes from their prison. Kong, who has been lonely since his debut in the MonsterVerse, is naturally excited at the prospect of finally meeting others just like him. However, we soon learn that these great apes were imprisoned for a reason. They previously attempted to take over the world under their leader, Skar King. Thankfully, Godzilla was there back then to stop them. The Iwi living in Hollow Earth send a signal to Godzilla, alerting him of what's to come. So, in anticipation for Skar King, Godzilla's plot for most of the movie is him trying to juice up and get stronger. Allegedly, the last war against the Great Apes almost killed Godzilla, so you can imagine why he's trying to power up before the rematch here. The climax of the movie has Kong and Godzilla teaming up to defeat Skar King, and they do! Everyone is happy, the world is saved. Now let's take a look at one of the most glaring issues of the movie, and that is that Skar King is just a very underwhelming villain. A lot of people say that a movie or a hero is only as good as the villain. Plenty of people judge movies based on the quality of the bad guy. And while I don't necessarily agree with that most of the time, for this movie, it's pretty relevant. And I say that because there's so much buildup, so much foretelling that Skar King is this big, terrible threat. So much of the movie, most of the first hour, in fact, is hyping us up about how bad it's gonna get, how terrified we should be. Ooh, the Iwi are sending a signal, war is coming. Ooh, Godzilla has to power himself up, he has to get upgrades because war is coming. Ooh, Gia is getting called to Hollow Earth, war is coming. We have to bring Mothra back to life, war is coming. Eileen even calls the events of the film the end of the world.
We believe that at the end of the world, one of their own will return.
All this buildup, all this fuss about the great apes coming free, about Skar King, about the conflict he's about to bring, they hype it up so much, so when the movie climaxes and the fight lasts for only one act of the movie, you're left feeling, eh? That's it? The first time I saw the final fight, I thought, huh. Did Godzilla really need to juice himself up for this 20-30 minute fight? Did we really need to bring Mothra back? I mean, I love seeing her, but what? It felt like we brought a nuclear bomb to a knife fight. So much of the movie is telling us that Skar King is a big threat, but it doesn't really show us that. This especially comes as a disappointment after the MonsterVerse villains that Godzilla's fought before. Ghidorah is naturally the standard, I think. He beat the shit out of Godzilla, and I really appreciated that because he felt like a real actual threat, something that actually challenged our hero. He was wreaking havoc all throughout that movie, him and Rodan just being absolute haters. And Godzilla actually really struggled a lot, and you could feel the fight. From the moment Ghidorah and Rodan appear on screen, and throughout their entire screen time, they are problems. They are stressful events. The fight with the Mutos from the 2014 movie even felt more of a challenge for Godzilla than the fight with the Great Apes here. Skar King doesn't show up until after an hour into Godzilla X Kong, and I think that's part of the problem. The fact that he's being hyped up so much, and only lasts 20-30 minutes as a villain, and doesn't really do that much damage. He has Shimu under his control, but even then, they never felt like actual threats. The fights were big and cool and fun, and they were awesome, sure, but they didn't hit as emotionally as other fights in the series have before. And that brings us to my next issue. Part 2, the scale and the stakes. I think scale and stakes have been a big issue for the MonsterVerse for a while now. If you have heroes this big, these titanic giants, naturally you have big fights with big stakes. And the bigger the stakes get, the easier it is for the audience to lose interest. The fate of the world is something we can all understand at an intellectual level, but on an emotional level, it's easier to care about one person than it is to care about every single person on Earth, you know? While Godzilla 2014 was criticized for its human characters, It was an earnest attempt at trying to make the stakes easier for audiences to understand and connect with. In the midst of Godzilla fighting the Mutos, our worries about the survival of the world are concentrated by worrying for the soldier guy and his wife and kid. Godzilla King of the Monsters did this a bit better too, with Lorraine Warren and Eleven and the people at Monarch. Kong Skull Island also had a pretty great cast of characters, and I honestly think that's the best MonsterVerse movie when it comes to balancing the characterizations of the Titans and the humans. Samuel Jackson, Brie Larson, and Mr. Loki were all pretty fun to watch in that movie. However, for Godzilla X Kong, the only humans we are given a chance to connect with are these guys, and they're not really that compelling. Compare them with any of the humans from the previous films, and you can see how cartoonish and flimsy these new ones are. At least Lorraine Warren in 11 had a complicated family dynamic. And do I even have to start with Serizawa? Seriously, love that guy, and his final scene is up there as one of my top MonsterVerse moments. But these new humans, they feel like they belong in the worst MCU films. They're quippy, lacking depth, and you don't really care about them. They're likable, but likable characters are different from characters you actually like. From an emotional standpoint, I see the movie trying with Eileen and Gia's mother-daughter relationship, which is great. An attempt is better than nothing. And besides, I love Caroline Polachek. I think Pang is wonderful, and she was great in The Night House. Jokes aside, the problem with Eileen and Gia is that when the climax of the movie hits, they, along with every other human character, basically disappear from the action. And that's a bad thing because they are the only proper representatives of the stakes we have in these movies, and yet they disappear. The stake in the movie is that if Skar King wins, he's gonna take over the world and humans will die. But if these are the humans, do we really care? These tiny humans are not stakes, not emotionally. We don't know any of them. If they all die, we don't care because the movie doesn't put in the work to make us care. If they all die in this city, yeah, intellectually, we'll recognize that it's bad, but emotionally, we won't really feel anything and nothing in the movie will change. I know there are a lot of people criticizing the previous films for involving the humans in the climactic Titan battles, but I do really think that putting the humans there in those big fights put the stakes in perspective. They were not flawlessly implemented, but they worked more than not. This is what I call the Transformers threshold in the title. The Titan battles are so big in terms of scale and stakes now, and without any real attempts at grounding them, it's getting really hard to care about anything. Just like in the Transformers movies, we can have all the slow-mo shots, all the big explosions, and all the buildings thrown around, but it's something that we're just not caring about anymore. And here's another thing that I'm going to bitch about that is probably purely subjective. I loved it in the previous movies when you could feel the vastness of these titans. When they took steps, when they moved, you felt how big they were. I first felt that went away in Godzilla vs. Kong, and it certainly was thrown out the window for this one. Part 3. Godzilla's Portrayal. I appreciate how much depth these newer movies have given Kong. He's lonely, he's longing to belong with others like him. I love that. I also really love his connection to Gia. In Godzilla vs. Kong, when he basically bolts into Hollow Earth because he was told there's a possibility he might find more apes like him there, my heart wrenched for him. I don't appreciate, though, that it seems like Kong's depth was given to us in exchange for Godzilla's. There was so much mystery, so much reverence given to Godzilla in the 2014 movie and in King of the Monsters. Those films felt like they actually emphasized the god part of his name. The slow shots, the obscured visibility. They focused on Godzilla's vastness and how insignificant humans are against this ancient, almost holy titan. In these newer films, it still feels like humans are insignificant to Godzilla, but not because he's an apathetic god beyond us, but because he's just stupid. It really feels like in these newer Adam Wingard movies, they're portraying Godzilla just as a giant lizard. And gone are his more mystical aspects. In King of the Monsters, one of their goals in portraying Godzilla was for him to evoke the last samurai archetype, that he feels resigned and prefers not to be a part of the world, but would nevertheless resurface when he's needed. That made him feel like this reclusive but necessary force. It made him feel like a jaded hero who is tired but is still heroic to his core. I really like that in those movies. In these newer ones, he's very obviously not that. That's not to say that I want the silly giant lizard aspects gone. It is a bit endearing, I have to admit, like it's kind of cute. I like that he's just like a giant Kong hater and will immediately try to kill Kong, or that he's sleeping in the Coliseum. I do think those are endearing aspects and I don't necessarily want them to go away. I just wish they could balance it out with more of the ancient Titan god aspect. It's a shame that not only does it feel like his characterization is in the back seat, but that it's also seemingly changed from god to giant lizard. But that just might be me. Again, these newer films under Adam Wingard's direction have made the choice to focus more on Kong as their protagonist. Godzilla's plotline in Godzilla X Kong was basically just a giant fetch quest, with not really any meaningful conflict. It's like putting him in the film just to say he has screen time, but not really having him go through anything that changes or challenges his character, except get stronger. Those are my thoughts. What about you guys? How do you feel about Godzilla's changes in characterization? How do you like the newer MonsterVerse movies? Please tell me in the comments, I would like to know. If you like this video, please leave a like or consider subscribing. That would help me out a lot. Thank you so much. That is it. I am out.